CTBK is more than just a full-service accounting firm. They are one team with an innovative approach that takes on each new challenge with collaborative problem-solving skills to provide creative solutions for their clients. Based right here in Western New York, CTBK is a champion for your business in our community. Additionally, CTBK goes beyond tax and attest services by offering a wide array of consulting and outsourced solutions tailored to meet the unique needs of your business, allowing you to focus on your operational and long-term strategic goals. Whether you're a large corporation, a small business, or somewhere in between, the team at CTBK is determined to help you succeed. Visit ctbk.com or call 716-630-2400. 716-630-2400 to learn how CTBK's one-team approach can work for you. Welcome to another Sports Equinox edition of Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants. I'm Tim Graham of The Athletic, here with my co-host Jonah Bronstein of Bronstein Enterprises. And we have the Bills at the halfway point, or at least for people of our vintage, Jonah, the traditional halfway point of 8 games, which is what the NFL schedule was from 1978 until just recently. So the Bills have gotten to their 8-game point with 5 wins, 3 losses. The trade deadline is tomorrow. We can talk about that. We got UB at Toledo on ESPN2 tomorrow night. The Sabres shut out the Avalanche over the weekend. Maybe they're finally starting to figure some things out offensively, even as their goaltending situation gets even more in flux. And of course, there's the World Series going on with Amherst High's Jonah Heim with the Texas Rangers going up against Super Bison, Torey Lovullo, and his Arizona Diamondbacks. So I'll let you pick, Jonah. Where do you want to start?
Just to acknowledge Western New Yorker in the World Series. It's been a decade since a player that was born in Western New York. Kevin Segrist was born in Lewiston, went to high school in Florida, and was a relief pitcher for the Cardinals 10 years ago. And then before that, it's 30 years. Dave Hollins, who we mentioned on the last podcast, is the last Western New Yorker to hit a home run in the baseball postseason. Now Jonah Heim's the first player since Hollins in the World Series, the first position player from Western New York. And it's, Jonah Heim's the guy who's got the Buffalo skyline tattooed on his arm. And he comes back in the summers, and he has his high school coach and his high school best friend and teammate in the stands in Texas for games 1 and 2. So it does give a Western New York rooting interest, even though the manager of the Diamondbacks and some other players involved in the World Series also have Buffalo ties to the Bisons.
Well, look, I've always thought that Bison's connections are always a stretch, because I don't really feel that people pay that close of attention to the Bisons, or at least not the casual, even the casual baseball fan, or even the serious baseball fan. I know a lot of serious baseball fans who don't go to Bison's games. And you kind of, you're really stretching it, again, to use that word, when it comes to forcing a Buffalo connection. Jonah Heim's actually from here, Amherst High School. It's not even, we're not even stretching the boundaries. It's not as though he's from the Rochester area or the Finger Lakes. I mean, this guy's Amherst High School. He's an all-star. He's really good. He's a key player. He is making big plays. As the catcher, he's involved in every play, but hitting home runs, and then Torey Lovullo. I think he was more Bison than most Bisons, so I guess that's an all right pull there. But usually, I don't think that people care that a guy passed through the Bisons for half a summer, or even managed here. I mean, whatever. They're just passing through. They're not from here. Occasionally, they do meet somebody, fall in love. Eric Wedge, I think, still lives in Western New York, former Bison's manager, former AL Manager of the Year with the Cleveland Indians. So, yeah, there are some who are there are degrees of it, but in general. So, yeah, Jonah Heim, very cool story. Now, you've written about that.
Did write about that for WIBB.com last week, talking to his high school coach and collecting some comments that Jonah's made in national MLB Network interviews coming into the week, and just kind of marking the occasion of having a Western New Yorker in the World Series for first time in a decade and first time in over a generation to have this kind of everyday all-star player as one of the teams competing for a championship. And he could be the first Western New Yorker, then it would be in 32 years. Mark Luthery won with the Braves in 1991. He was another person that was born in Buffalo, left the area by the time he was drafted into the MLB, but had kind of maintains that Buffalonian aspect. And he's the last local to win a World Series, win a championship. We'll see how this goes for the Texas Rangers. It's tied 1-1 going into Game 3 is going on right now while we're recording.
Yeah. Well, it also feels like hockey season finally, after a couple of weeks of, I think, Western New York sports fans wondering if we're going to put the Sabres on the shelf for a little bit. We'll maybe come back and check in on the Sabres in a month and see what's going on. They actually have woken up a bit, maybe more than a bit, shutting out one of the best teams in the Western Conference on a weekend when the Bills aren't playing. So a little more attention being placed on the Sabres on Sunday afternoon. Colorado comes to town and the Sabres whip their ass. And it's a feel-good game for the Sabres after what they've been through, the slow start, the turbulence, wondering what's going to come of this 3-goalie situation, which unfortunately is sorting itself out because of injuries. Devin Levi having his general soreness, which a little bit of a red flag and lends itself to the idea that the Sabres are leaning on this kid a little bit too much, too early. And Eric Comrie with the knee, and then Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, who looked great in his previous game, and then gives up a bunch of goals late, or I guess I should say his previous start, and then comes back against Colorado and locks down that first career NHL shutout. Gets you into, I think if you're a Sabres fan, a pretty good place as you're heading into games against the Philadelphia Flyers, an old friend Daniel Briere, and then, of course, on Friday, the arch rival Toronto Maple Leafs. A little juice with the Sabres now this week.
Actually got a home and home with the Flyers, and then that Leafs game coming up on Saturday. But
I'm sorry. I thought it was Leafs is Saturday.
Leafs Saturday, Flyers back in
I thought it was
Buffalo on Friday night. Having 3 NHL goalies at this point is looking like a little bit of an asset for the Sabres, where some thought it might be a detriment at the start of the season or make some roster maneuvering difficult carrying the 3 goalies. And now with 2 of them hurt, having UPL available and ready to play and playing one of the better games of his career. Now, the Sabres played probably their best defense in front of the goaltender of the season against UPL, with UPL in the net against Colorado. And that contributed a lot to him being able to get a shutout with, only 24 saves. But Colorado's a very good team. Stanley Cup championship 2 years ago. We're 6-0 coming into a road game that they lost in Pittsburgh before coming to Buffalo. And for the Sabres to win that convincingly against another good team, a team that had won in its last 6 trips to Buffalo prior to that, that's encouraging. Now, Colorado maybe was a little bit of a get-out-of-town game and not playing at their best at the end of a road trip and ready to get back home and regroup a little bit. But the Sabres are trending up, at least in terms of scoring more goals and looking like and letting in fewer goals, even though the record isn't quite where you would want it to be and they're not in playoff position quite yet. Over the last week or so, it does seem like this team is playing better, playing more consistently, and looking like a team that can start stringing some more wins together.
Yeah, I do want to clarify the schedule because I had it in my mind this home and home against the Flyers was on back-to-back nights, Wednesday, Thursday. It's not. There's Wednesday, then there's a day off, and then the Flyers come to KeyBank Center on Friday night. Then the Sabres go to play the Maple Leafs on Saturday, and then off to Carolina next Tuesday. So, and then Minnesota comes here. The Penguins are here. No, then at the Penguins. Anyways, a rougher group of teams coming up. Some games in which I think we're going to learn a lot about the Sabres coming up.
Well, and if you want to take a little bit of a glass empty approach and looking at the Sabres, you look back at what the schedule has been so far, and opening the season with 6 of the first 9 games at home. And if you had looked at the schedule before the season started, you kind of thought it was an opportunity for the Sabres to get off to a good start, get on a roll, rack up some points, because they do have some longer road trips and tougher stretches later in the season. And that the fact that they only have 4 wins and they're less than a point per game coming out of this first 9-game stretch, it's not concerning, but it could come to a point later in the season where you look back at that start and think the Sabres needed more points and more wins early on at home that they were going to need later on.
Yeah, 6 out of 9 at home, like you said, 4 out of 5 to start the season at home, and stumbled a bit. It seemed like an opportunity to really make a statement early. And clearly the Sabres were out of sorts exiting training camp in the preseason and starting the season, but seemed to be finding their way. What would you just say, Jonah, has been the mood in the dressing room regarding the Sabres now that they're starting to get going a little bit more? Alex Tuch gets a goal, which seemed to be a load off of him. He had been playing well, just not scoring, and it seemed to be manifesting, or at least not manifesting, festering with him. And then he gets that goal. Seemed to be one of those classic hockey moments where a really good player, despite all of his success in the past, was maybe doubting himself a little bit.
Yeah, and Tuch had a really nice assist in the game yesterday against Colorado. He's got 4 points in the last 3 games. You know, the mood has changed game to game because it's been a bit of a trading wins and losses situation for the Sabres. I'm not there for the road games. I'm sure it's been a different reaction, the way some of those games ended and some of the circumstances and the fights and things like that happened in Ottawa involving Alex Tuch in that case. But the mood coming out of when they had lost to Montreal a week before, they had lost the game, but there was a belief that, you know, they played well enough to win and that the offense was there and the goals were going to come and that they deserved to win that game. Now, yesterday, they beat Colorado and also played a way that they felt like they deserved to win, and a little bit validating to what they were saying earlier after some losses, that they feel like they're playing their game. That's what Don Granato keeps saying, and that the wins are going to come, the scoring is going to come. They still probably need to focus on playing better defensive hockey all over the ice from all the different positions and in the right situations. And the goaltending, even though it was good in the last game and has been good at points this season, is still inconsistent and a big question mark. But I think the vibe, it's not vibes like it's been for the Sabres where, you know, they got off to better starts the past 2 seasons, and they were surprisingly good starts that made it a very feel-good story. There's a more pressure, and I think there's a more muted excitement when the team plays well right now than there had been in the past couple seasons. But you're still seeing that vibe of confidence that this team, even with a losing record, feels like they're a competitive team and pushing for the playoffs, despite some losses early on that don't put them in that standings position right away.
Yeah, Philadelphia Flyers, I just wanted to get a 30,000 foot view. They're right ahead of the Sabres in the standings, which doesn't mean much right now. But through 8 games, they have 28 goals. They've given up 25, which is a little bit better than middle of the pack in terms of scoring anyway. But the goaltending has not been there for the Flyers. So winnable games, competitive games, etc. I don't know. I mean, maybe I don't know if we're looking too much into it, but I mean, when you start, you know, it is still October, at least for another couple of days, but teams miss out on the postseason by a point. They lose on tiebreakers. You know, these games do count just as much in terms of value as they do in February and March. So I don't know. Maybe we're not looking too much into it. Maybe it just seems silly because there's so much season to go, but every game does count. Jonah, the Buffalo Bills, 5-3 at the traditional halfway point. There are 9 games left, but I will say 4 at home, 5 on the road. And as we've talked about quite a bit on this podcast, the back end of this schedule, a lot different than the first part of the schedule. And it really begins Sunday night at Cincinnati. They do return home for a couple of games. They host the Broncos and the Jets, a team in Denver just knocked off the Chiefs. Maybe a fluke, probably a fluke. I don't know that Denver is has figured things out and they're going to come to Orchard Park in a couple of weeks and be a existential threat to the Bills' playoff hopes. But then the Jets, a team that's already beaten the Bills and a defense that gives them fits. Then at Philadelphia, the Bills then have their bye week. Then at Kansas City, home against the Cowboys, at the Chargers, in Los Angeles 2 days before Christmas, then at home against the Patriots, finishing the season at Miami. So in 3 weeks, the Bills will have only 2 home games left and 4 road games against pretty tough competition. Is what's your general take on the Bills here, as I keep loosely calling it the halfway point? And are they at risk of not making the playoffs?
I think even though it's not as early as it is in the NHL season, I think it's too early to tell, especially with the Bills having a winning record. And if the playoffs ended today, they would be one of the wild card teams and they're in position. And if you look at the AFC standings, there's a lot of teams with losing records. So, it might not be a difficult to get that 7th seed or whatnot. However, I think you got to be concerned with the Bills the past 3 weeks. I mean, I think 3 weeks ago we were looking ahead to this Cincinnati game and assuming that the Bills had 3 easy games, 3 get right games, and they would, be in a great position, and did not expect, either they won 2 of the games, but did not expect them to either lose any of the games or have as much difficulty as they did beating the Giants and difficulty pulling away and slamming the door shut on Tampa Bay in that game last week, especially the home team on a Thursday night. You usually don't see the visiting team kind of rally late the way that happened. That could be a little bit concerning. The injuries the Bills have accrued on defense along the way seems to potentially lower their ceiling of what they could do in the postseason or how far this team can actually go. But, it's an opportunity here against the team that beat them in the playoffs last year and one of the other Super Bowl contenders in the league. And if the Bills do win on the road and play well against the Bengals, which they did not do in either of their opportunities last year, I think that changes a lot of the perspective about the Bills. So it's an opportunity here, I think, to have a lot more confidence or a lot more belief internally and externally in the Bills. And if they don't win the game, I think you kind of got to see how they look and see where they're at after that to really discern how concerning that would be.
Well, how much of a buyer should Brandon Beane be at the trade deadline? I'm asking rhetorically before I open it up to you, Jonah. I think that the Bills do need some help. Brandon Beane has in the past shown signs of making acquisitions at the trade deadline in anticipation of what he may need later down the home stretch, most notably Dean Marlowe last year. Jordan Poyer was in and out of the lineup, getting banged up with the way that he plays and at his age. Damar Hamlin was healthy at the time. Micah Hyde, of course, was out for the season, but Brandon Beane identifying the safety position as one that he wanted to solidify. Lo and behold, Dean Marlowe is playing significant minutes later in the season and starting in the 2 postseason games. Now, you're not going to anticipate what happened to Damar Hamlin in week 17 at Cincinnati, but Brandon Beane, again, that's just my way of saying a guy who may be shoring up positions more than going after the headline acquisition tomorrow. I will say, I know that it's sexy to talk about offensive players because the Bills have a really good offense already, and adding a superstar like, I know that the Titans have said they're not going to trade Derrick Henry, but as of a couple of days ago, there were these bullshit rumor websites that had Derrick Henry coming to the Bills, and people, chubbing up over the idea of Derrick Henry coming to the Bills. I don't see the Bills in need of offensive help. I see them in need of desperate defensive spackle. They need some linebacker help. AJ Klein clearly isn't it. If AJ Klein was a worthwhile player, then he would be on the field at some point. The Bills wouldn't have cut him however many times they have over the last couple of years, put him on the practice squad, cut him, brought him back, elevate him for a game, back down, whatever. But I do think that there's been a huge drop off in the tandem of Matt Milano, Terrell Bernard, and the tandem of Terrell Bernard as the lead dog and either Dorian Williams or Terrell Dodson. And I think that the Bills clearly don't know what they want to do with that second linebacker spot too, because sometimes it's Dorian Williams, sometimes it's Terrell Dodson. It depends on the circumstance, who's starting, who's not starting. I don't know what's out there in terms of linebackers or cornerbacks. Teams aren't just giving away cornerbacks. So I don't know. I mean, this is just a hunch. I don't have inside info, but I would think that the odds would say that defensive line help again. Daquan Jones being out doesn't hurt nearly as much when Ed Oliver's on the field, but if Ed Oliver can't play, we just saw 2 weeks ago what a big difference that was when the Patriots were gashing the Bills interior and running when they wanted to, and screen passes and crossing. I mean, all these types of things that the Patriots were doing against the Bills' first and second levels, forcing them to go sideline to sideline at times when they really just don't have the ability, as good of ability as they used to. So I would think that Brandon Beane's looking for help at interior defensive line and at linebacker. That said, it could be depth more than it is somebody who you can plug in, be a starter, and make the defense look like it did before Matt Milano and Daquan Jones suffered their injuries.
Right. Well, the Bills mostly need help in areas where they've suffered injuries, injury replacements for starting players, and they've signed veterans to the practice squad to get by so far today, and reportedly doing that again with Leonard Fournette at running back today into tomorrow. I don't expect the Bills to make a big splash move. I think that these veteran names that they're signing off the street are probably bigger names than some of the players that they might bring in a trade. That doesn't mean I don't think that they couldn't find a valuable player to fill in depth-wise, as you mentioned, the spackle on defense at linebacker, or really any of the positions besides safety. I think they could use some help. The intrigue seems to be more whether they will trade away Kaiir Elam, and whether that is, I think the conversation to have there is whether that's really a good idea at the place where his value is, and if the Bills get better in the short and long term by making a quick decision there with him.
He's still on his rookie contract. He was a first-round pick. You're going to have to find a team that wants to take him and his contract. That could be easier said than done, but that clearly would free up some flexibility for the Bills to do some other things. But he's not in their plans. They would not have any second thoughts in saying goodbye to Kaiir Elam. That would not be a tough departure for the Bills front office to stomach if they were able to get something out of him, or for him, I should say.
Isn't that a little, I would argue that's rather quick to give up on a first round pick, and Kaiir Elam, or really any first round player with that kind of talent and pedigree, seems to be the type of player you'd want to trade for at a reduced rate at the trade deadline, and you don't necessarily want to be the team giving away first round picks. And what are the Bills going to get back for him? If it's a future draft pick, how does that really help this injury depleted defense right now doing that?
Well, it could be a move in advance of another move, to create some salary cap space or whatever. I don't know, but yeah,
they would create like $1.5 million in salary cap room, but that's not a lot.
No, it's not. It's not there. But maybe it's one move in there. But yeah, a lot of people are talking about Kaiir Elam as though he is a coveted piece, maybe on a team that really values his bump and run ability and has had high reports or of him coming out of college. But with the Bills, it just hasn't translated. So maybe there's a team out there, and let's face it, there almost always is a scout or general manager out there who will convince their team that this guy is that we can figure this guy out. Let's get him into our building and we'll be able to fix him. Now, I don't know if Kaiir Elam has that type of ceiling that teams are going to be willing to part with an asset to give that a shot. But if the Bills aren't asking much, I guess we'll see in the next few hours. Putting you on the spot because I didn't have you prepped for this, but is there like a player of the midpoint, Jonah, that has maybe been the most surprising or person who's unsung hero type who should be getting more credit than they are? Or the biggest disappointment, something like that?
I would, before he got hurt, I would have said Daquan Jones was the unsung hero of the defense and playing very, very well. I think you saw a little bit of that with Poona Ford. Had a good game coming in there against Tampa Bay, and he's, helped fill in the gaps there defensively. And then the offensive line as a whole, one, being healthy, and two, playing well. I think that they've gotten good play out of the offensive line, and that's something for the Bills to be, encouraged by, because there were some question marks about that coming out of last season and coming into this season with the moves that they've made.
We're not talking about Spencer Brown a lot anymore. After week 2, it's kind of been okay. The offensive line has just been there, which is what you want out of it, your offensive line. You're not talking about dumb penalties, at least not regular dumb penalties. We're not talking about Josh Allen getting destroyed by anybody, or, there are some places that you'd like some improvement here and there, but by and large, I think that the offensive line has been fabulous. All the players who are supposed to play well have been. Osiris Torrance, the 59th overall pick, has played like a veteran. So yeah, I think the offensive line is probably deserves more credit than it gets on a regular basis.
The biggest concern I would have about the Bills right now, this is usually tied to the offensive line, but in this case, not really, is Josh Allen's shoulder and Josh Allen's health. And how many weeks is that going to linger? Is there a possibility if he takes another hit, does that get worse? Will he be this reduced version of himself like he was for several weeks with the elbow injury last year, or unwilling to run and take as many hits because he's protecting his shoulder? Or will this injury heal up and really not be a thing after another couple of weeks? But how much longer the Josh Allen shoulder saga continues, I think, is the biggest point of concern with the Buffalo Bills right now.
Yeah, I think that my unsung hero, or somebody who has been underappreciated so far, is Gabriel Davis. And I know that he's almost like a default setting for a place where the Bills can improve. He's been a disappointment, blah, blah, blah. But he is actually on pace to have the best season of his career in terms of catches, in terms of yardage. According to Pro Football Reference, he has only 2 drops on the entire season. His drop percentage is at a career low of 4.3%. So, yeah, I do know that you can go back only 2 weeks. You need to go back and find where he had 1 catch for 6 yards, but that's not necessarily his fault. He can't throw himself the ball. He's had big games. He's had a touchdown in all but 3 games this year. So I think Gabriel Davis is somebody that Bills fans have just gotten used to writing off or kicking around or whatever. I think he's having a really good year and deserves a little bit more. Biggest disappointment, I don't know, Terrell Dodson, maybe. I mean, he was a guy who Von Miller was laughing at the media for suggesting that somebody else would get that starting linebacker job back in training camp. And he's having trouble being the 3rd best. Even with Matt Milano out, Terrell Dodson isn't exactly, the most reliable player in Sean McDermott's defense.
Another disappointment has been Von Miller, not really giving the Bills anything through the first half of the season. Don't know how much longer that's going to continue, or if he's going to find his conditioning and rhythm and regain, confidence and explosion from that leg, or if that's going to be something that doesn't happen until the following season. And, if Von Miller's not himself and Josh Allen maybe isn't have all his superpowers for whatever reason right now, and you already got Tre'Davious White on injured reserve and Matt Milano on injured reserve, that's a lot of star power, a lot of wattage in that regard that the Bills don't have.
A lot of money.
They still are
a lot of money
roster.
Committed to somebody who's not contributing as much as AJ Epinesa.
Yeah, and how far can an NFL team go without its very best players, and without its very best players healthy and playing up to their full potential? The Bills have a deep roster and a lot of good players, and I think have a high floor, but is that ceiling a little bit lower with the way things are going health-wise, and just not having, other than Stephon Diggs, not having too many of their best players playing at that all-pro level right now.
I want to make one quick mention before we switch over to UB and then wrap things up. We'll do a little quick one here, and then we're going to come back later in the week with another Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK. This concept of Josh Allen spreading the ball around. We were asking Josh about it. He was very happy about the fact that he was spreading the ball around. He made with a wink, said that I'll let you guys out there, meaning us reporters, discuss what he did better in that game Thursday night against the Buccaneers. To which I came back and said, all right, Josh, yeah, we can say what we think is better, but what did you think you did well tonight? What was refreshing for you? And the first words out of his mouth were spread the ball around. He didn't really spread the ball around. I think that the concept of spreading the ball around is one thing. I just want to bring up the game book here. He just threw it to guys who weren't Stephon Diggs. If that's not technically spreading the ball around, to me, it almost comes off as code of I got other guys involved at the expense of Stephon Diggs, because spreading the ball around, I'm using finger quotes, spreading the ball around on Thursday night involved 4 receivers, a grand total of 4 receivers who got more than 1 target. James Cook got 1 target. Latavius Murray got 1 target. Beyond that, only 4 other guys were throwing the ball. Gabriel Davis, 12 targets for 9 catches, 87 yards and a touchdown. Khalil Shakir, 6 targets, caught them all for 92 yards. And then Dalton Kincaid had his, maybe not his breakout game because he's put together a couple good ones in a row, but 5 catches on 7 targets, 65 yards, including the touchdown from 22 yards. I just think it was interesting, and I've been thinking about it since Thursday night, this concept of spreading it around. He's thrown it to more people several times this year. There was no Deontay Hardy target. There was no Trent Sherfield target. Dawson Knox and Quentin Morris were not on the field because they're injured. So spreading the ball around, I think that is a kind of a little bit of admission that they know they need to not worry about keeping Stephon Diggs fed, and they need to get the ball to these other guys because it's there. It makes the offense move, and it's not really about diversifying or giving the defense more players to guard or more players to think about, because really the only 4 players who got the ball were the 4 people who run the routes on pretty much every play.
Yeah, and Trent Sherfield and Deontay Hardy through the first half of the season haven't had as big of a roles as it seemed like they might in training camp or coming into the season. Dalton Kincaid was kind of that slot receiver, third receiver. And now with the Dawson Knox injury, the Bills seem to probably be shifting towards more of a 11 personnel, 1 tight end, 3 wide receivers, base offense, as opposed to playing the 2 tight ends as much as they did early in the season and said they wanted to do after drafting Kincaid. I don't know if we saw enough in the Buccaneers games to say, I think there were signs that the Bills might be better with 3 wide receivers on the field, which was their favorite formation over the past few years. And when the offense was at its best with Cole Beasley in the slot, that's what you saw in almost every down. But Dalton Kincaid is an excellent receiver who's, a rookie and a young player, and probably not as good of a blocker and not as good of an all-around tight end as Dawson Knox or what you want in that position. Will that cause some issues for the Bills offense, or will having 3 wide receivers plus Dalton Kincaid as the tight end open the offense up even more? And you did see a little bit of that in the first half.
Well, I thought it was interesting, Jonah, to that point about Dalton Kincaid. The Buccaneers entered that game, or they entered week 8 as the team that blitzes the 3rd most in the entire NFL. And Dalton Kincaid ran a route on every play. I thought we'd see him be forced to block because he was the only tight end dressed. I guess you have Reggie Gilliam and you could do some things like that, but David Andrews or an eligible lineman. But Dalton Kincaid was still just a receiving tight end on Thursday, and it was fine. They handled it well.
Yeah, you're kind of in a 4 wide receiver alignment now with Dalton Kincaid as the main tight end. And the Bills have done very well with the more spread formations over the years. Josh Allen seems more comfortable in that, but that's the Josh Allen that is quick to pull down the ball and run and put defenses in tough positions, which he did on occasion against the Buccaneers last week. But it's been said, and we've seen the evidence of, that the Bills don't want that to be as big a part of their offensive diet this year as it was in past years.
UB at Toledo on Tuesday night. That game is on ESPN2. So the UB Bulls getting back on national TV. Where, Jonah, of course, you follow UB way closer than I do. This is Toledo's a good team. Is this Well, I don't know. I'll just
Yeah, well, I'll
feel
set it up
free
for
to
you this
tell us
way.
what you think
Yeah,
about UB, where they are as they head into this game.
UB coming off a win. They won at Kent State this past weekend, not this past weekend, but the weekend before, and they it was their best defensive effort of the season, and probably their best win, best performance in a win. And even though they have a 3-5 overall record, they're 3-1 in the MAC, which was tied for the MAC East lead. Now Miami just won another game over the weekend, so UB would have to win this game against Toledo to keep pace with Miami in the division standings. Toledo's favored by 15.5 points. They're the best team in the MAC, the undefeated team in the West Division, and 7-1 overall. So it's going to be a difficult game for UB, but UB beat Toledo last year. And I do think they have an opportunity to compete and play well and maybe have an opportunity to win this game. UB needs to win 3 of the last 4 games to be bowl eligible. 3 of the last 4 might put them in a possibility to win the division at 6-2. But, you know, they're really putting their backs against the wall with another loss. Then they have to win the last 3, and those are difficult games. Ohio's a good team in the division who they play at home next week. Miami looks like the best team in the division. They play them on the road in 2 weeks. So while this Toledo game is probably the most difficult game on their schedule, it is a game that can really be a fulcrum point and do a lot for UB season if they are able to go in there and pull out the road upset.
And they finish their regular season and probably their season, but maybe they'll have a bowl game. But they wrap up right before Thanksgiving at home against Eastern Michigan.
I think I've been saying this for weeks about UB, but this is a game where, you know, if they win, then I think you're really looking at a bowl eligible season and still in the thick of the MAC East race and a possibility to go and compete for the MAC championship. And if they lose, they're not out of it, but they're very, very close to having a season where they're no longer relevant, you know, after 1 or 2 more losses.
All right, Jonah, thanks. And thanks to everybody out there for watching and listening. Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants. Please mash that like button, rate us, subscribe to us, do all those things, because it helps us. It helps promote us on the different platforms. They all have their different algorithms and the things that they like to do. So the more that you support us, the better it is for everyone, the better access that we get, placement, whatever other circle jerk things you can think of.
And it's just cool for us to see when the likes and the comments rack up, and we know that.
Yeah, I guess that's maybe one of the bigger things is we know that people are actually watching and listening, that they give a shit. But yeah, thanks to everybody out there. We have been getting some comments underneath. I mean, not a ton, but happy to turn the comments underneath the YouTube channel videos into a little forum. People have been asking questions. I've been answering. As it's actually helpful. It gets me off Twitter that much more. All right, Jonah, thanks for this. Thanks to everybody out there for paying us any mind on Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants. The financial needs of a business go beyond tax and attest services. That's why CTBK goes beyond accounting services and offers outsourced solutions through their affiliation with CFO Solutions Plus. These additional services allow clients to focus on their operational and long-term strategic goals. Trust CTBK's outsourced solutions to provide cost-effective, value-added financial services tailored to your company's needs. Call CTBK at 716-630-2400. Again, 716-630-2400. Or go to ctbk.com to learn more about CTBK's outsourced solutions.